It's the weekend and you have financial questions that need answering. That can only mean one thing. It's time for Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
Welcome. It's 2020, first show of the brand new year. Welcome, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. We always appreciate you taking the time. We are broadcasting live from the Capital One studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Hopefully you've got a little bit of money in your wallet after the holidays. Maybe a few financial resolutions you got looming. I don't know, perhaps. If not, that's okay. Maybe we'll just sort of ease into it. Every time you think of a financial question, I want you to say to yourself, I should email Jill. The email address, askjill@jillonmoney.com. We'd be happy to help you out. Let's start the show with Matt. He's calling from Maryland.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call.
Of course.
I am a teacher in Maryland, and Maryland has a teacher's pension system.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been teaching for 7 years, and I'm planning to leave the district and the profession at the end of this year.
No, what about my pension? I'm sorry.
I know.
You're blowing out. You're done.
Right.
Okay.
Well, yeah, for several reasons. I'm really proud of the work I've done, but it's time for a change. And about a month before I was hired, they changed the vestment period from 10 years to 5, so I won't be vested when I leave. So I'm wondering, what to do with that chunk of change.
So there's money that you put in, but you don't get the money that they put in. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay.
We put in about 7%
Mm-hmm.
Of our pay, and that's the money. Those are my contributions that I'll have access to.
And how much is that?
That's about $28,000.
Okay, and that's pre-tax that went in there. And what are you doing going forward? Like, what's your new career job? Will you be making more money after being a teacher? What? I assume you make more money, but you lose the pension. What's the story there?
Well, not necessarily. So I'm taking the opportunity to explore some passions that I've had that probably initially won't pay as much. Now, my husband will be experiencing a large pay jump.
I love that husband of yours. He sounds gorgeous.
Yeah, but he is. So, from a family standpoint, we'll have that security. And then obviously my hope is that within a relatively short amount of time, I will be making at least what I have been as a teacher.
Okay.
But it's less motivated by pay and more by just passions that I have to pursue.
All right. That sounds good. So when are you planning on leaving the teaching job?
July.
July. Okay. Will you have zero income coming in, or are you going to do something on the side?
So something on the side, for sure.
All right. Yeah. And is the main question what to do with the $28,000?
Right, because I have a Roth IRA that I could roll it into, and then I would pay, I guess, income tax on that amount.
Yes.
Because Roth is after tax. But I also, the district offers 403B plans that I could set up before leaving, so I have a place to kind of roll it over in an before
I wouldn't do that. That's not necessary. There's two. I mean, look, so there's two big choices. One is you can just roll it over into a regular IRA, right? A traditional IRA, and the money goes, the $28,000 will come in as cash, and you invest it.
Okay.
No biggie. No need to do the whole 403B thing. Now, that said, do you have savings that you're not telling me about?
Well, so not much. I sort of had some wilderness years in my 20s and had seasonal work as an outdoor facilitator. And I kind of just recently got my financial house in order a few years ago, so I have some savings. But just to give you an idea, so we together, my husband and I have an emergency fund that we're currently building. It's at about $15,000 right now. We have short-term savings that sort of flows in and out. Right now, it's at about $6,000, and then in my Roth IRA, I have about $15,000 there as well, and I put in $500 a month.
Okay. So, I wouldn't want you to drain your emergency reserve fund to make the Roth IRA contribution. There's two things here. One is you guys are married filing jointly for tax purposes?
Well, that's a good question. So we've got to look at that because he has a lot of medical school debt, And there's a program where if you work in a non-for-profit hospital system, you can get it forgiven after 10 years. So we want to be paying the lowest we have to on that. And since that's determined by income, we might file separately.
You should check into that. I bet that it's not going to be a big difference for you. So what will your total earnings be and what will his earnings be?
Good question. So mine will so if I make this transition in July and go to something maybe part-time, mine will probably be in the vicinity of $40,000.
Okay. And what about him?
So he'll be jumping up. So his will probably be in the vicinity of $90,000.
Okay.
Because this change in his salary happens midway through the year.
Okay. So, I mean, look, I'm going to make you crazy right now. There would be a very good case if you were single. And again, this is predicated on this really making sense for you. I don't know if it will. That if your income, if you're filing single, okay, your income bracket, your income tax bracket would be probably most of your income tax at 12%. And so in that case, if you were to take that $28,000 and pay the tax that's due on it, you know, you might not be paying such a high rate. You might be, I mean, maybe it'd pop up into the 22%. But again, the problem I have with that is essentially I worry that you guys are going to deplete your emergency reserves. I could make a financial case for why it's so smart for you to pay taxes on that $28,000 at low rates today. However, it's really hard for me to justify getting, especially when you're in a time of transition, to take some of that $15,000 in your savings account. It would be very, very hard for me to justify that you would spend that. So here's, I think, what we're going to do. I think number one, you take the $28,000 and you roll. Where's your Roth IRA held right now?
Vanguard.
Okay. Open up a traditional IRA at Vanguard. Roll the $28,000 into the traditional when you're done working. Okay?
Okay.
Just be careful. And if he's going to do a loan forgiveness program, be very careful about it. The rules are tricky. In terms of your, you know, kind of like your game plan going forward, just remember that during this time of transition, cash is your friend. You really want to make sure that, you know, as much as possible as you guys are transitioning to making more money, you know, sort of for a minute, maybe not making so much money for you, but as a couple being able to do that, that you don't get suckered into doing something dumb. Like, you know, in the middle of all of this, what we're going to do is we're going to buy a massive house. Don't do that. Someone will give you money to buy a house. Don't do it. Okay.
Okay.
And let me just finish up here by just saying to you, how old are you? You said 34. You know what?
34.
You're still young. You've got money saved. Make this transition. Don't let it go on forever. Don't plow through all of your savings to do this. Find yourself, then find a job, and make sure that you don't make any huge decisions while you're in transition. Okay.
Okay.
We'll get back to your questions in just a little bit. In the meantime, go to JillOnMoney.com. Got a lot of content. Yep, during the holidays, Mark was like a little elf, very busy, populating the website. JillOnMoney.com. And if you're there and you've got a question, just click the Contact Us button, and we'll be happy to help you out. All right, one little bit of a break, and then back to you.
Back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger helps you take the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. It is a new year, and it is a new you, and that means it's time to focus on taking care of yourself. I know you give a lot during the holidays. That's great, but let's take care of your financial questions. Give us a holler. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. Let's get back to the callers. It's John in Virginia.
Hey, Jill. Glad to be here. So I had a question for you. Me and my wife are about 28 and 29 years old, and our goal is to reach financial independence by age 40 or thereabouts.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. So you are the FIRE people, the financial independence, retire early.
We want to be, yeah.
Great.
So with that goal in mind, we were wondering about how we should invest going forward over the next 11 or 12 years, because our understanding is a 401k, that sort of money would not be accessible until well after age 40.
So that's actually a very interesting comment. You bring that up, and I just want to point that out to people for, younger people listening. Normally, we'll just sort of say to people, hey, max out your 401k, but you're absolutely right. If you tap that account before you're age 59 and a half, there could be a problem. Let me go back a second. So you and your wife, how much do you guys make together?
A little over $300K a year.
Okay. Do you both have stable jobs?
Very stable.
Oh, I love very stable. Will either of you be expecting a pension?
No.
Okay. Kids yet or no kids yet?
We're expecting 2 kids this year.
What? Your wife's pregnant with twins?
Correct, yes.
Holy smokerinos. Oh, my gosh. Okay. I'm excited for you.
Thank you.
When are you guys due?
In May, somewhere around there.
What are you going to do during this period in terms of maternity, paternity leave? What are you planning on doing?
So we're both fortunate that both of our companies will offer, I think, 90 days of leave.
Okay, great. Now, let's move on and see, how are you currently managing the $300,000 a year that you're earning? Do you own a home?
Yes, we own our home here, and we also own a couple of investment properties.
Oh, interesting. The home here is worth, the primary, how much is that worth?
$570. We just bought it last year.
Fantastic. What's the outstanding mortgage amount?
$550.
All right. So you didn't put a lot of money down. What's the rate? What's the rate on that?
3.5, 3.6.
That's great. Is it fixed?
Yes.
And 30-year?
30-year.
Okay. So you're going to stick around. You bought that house because you got these twins. You got to have a house. Okay. Investment properties, what are they worth and what are their outstanding mortgage balances? You can, give me a one by one.
One is worth about $80,000. It's a condo I bought in college, and I think we owe about $20 on it.
Okay.
The other is the home we lived in before we moved to Virginia. That is worth about $170, and we would owe about $130.
Are you trying to sell it, or are you just keeping it as income property?
I am keeping them as income property for now.
Okay. And when you look at the cash flow from these properties right now, not, pretending that the mortgage just sticks around forever, what's the cash flow look like? How much are you bringing in every month?
From both of the properties, it would be about $500 or $600 over expenses.
That's fantastic. And that's only going to improve if you really do keep them, right, over time. So there's that
correct.
passive income that's coming through. All right. Are you both using 401ks through work?
No. So I use a 401k. She has a TSP.
Okay. And are you maxing them or not?
Not maxing them.
How much are you putting into the 401k? Do you get a match?
Yeah, we do get a match. So about 5% goes into the 401k.
And that's what you're putting in terms of your contribution as well?
Yeah.
Okay. And your wife, what is she doing in the thrift savings plan?
Her thrift savings plan is 10% of her income. So she makes about $100. So 10% of that goes into her TSP.
Fantastic. Okay. So I know you're going to have a ton of expenses coming up. I get that. But the way that life is being lived today, what is your cash flow on that $300 after you've basically put the money into your retirement accounts and paid your basic bills? Is there money left over every month?
There's about, I'd say, average $3,500 left over.
Great. That's fantastic. And do you think that that's going to change because of the kids? In other words, will you have to pay someone to help you out in the house and babysitting or nanny or anything like that?
Yeah, most likely.
How much of that do you think of the $3,500 a month is? What do you think's just going to go away at some, essentially because of the kids?
Probably about $2,000 a month if I'm being super lucky.
All right, so then there'll be $1,500 a month is what we're talking about. And by the way, while you have this fat cash flow and this nice surplus, we want you to be socking it away just in terms of some safe money. Do you have a let's call it an emergency reserve / new babies fund.
Yes, about $40,000 in cash.
Okay. How much do you have in each of your retirement accounts right now?
Not much. So I would believe in the TSPs there's about 15 or 20,000,
Mm-hmm.
and in mine there's about 15,000.
Okay. Any other investments out besides those retirement accounts? Any brokerage accounts?
Small brokerage account with about 5,000.
Okay. And there's no debt beyond the mortgage, correct?
So we do have student loans.
Oh, now you tell me. I'm just kidding. Okay.
Yeah.
How much?
120,000.
How are you, when you told me you had $3,500 a month that was free cash flow, did that include paying down the minimum on the student loans or more than the minimum?
We are paying more than the minimum on the student loan.
Yeah.
Simply because we don't want them to get bigger with the interest.
Mm-hmm. Why the financial independence by 40? What's the 40 is obviously, sort of like an idealized number, but, you guys are young. I'm wondering why you've put this goal out there.
It's not necessarily to retire, but I think after working for a couple of years, we've only been working for about 2 or 3 years, we both have kind of an entrepreneurial feeling inside of us, and we kind of want to get to a place where we could afford to maybe start a business that might not be profitable for 2 or 3 years.
Interesting. Okay, so that's a little bit different. So I'm intrigued by that. Okay, so generally speaking, I think that you guys are on track to at least try something like that. Obviously, the student loans are the sort of the boogeyman in all of this, because I think you would probably feel a little bit under the gun to start a new business carrying all of that debt into a new business. So by that time, we'd want you to have those student loans paid off. What are the interest rates about?
5 to 6%.
Yeah, I mean 5 to 6 is fine. It's not crazy. It's not credit card rates, but it's a high enough rate that I want you to get that paid off. So that means that while you have this free cash flow, you've got a couple of choices. It sounds to me like the emergency reserve fund, at least in the next, I would just take all of your free cash flow and throw it into that emergency reserve fund before the kids are born, okay? And don't do anything with it. Then once they're born, what you really need to figure out is, how's my cash flow? And then from there, you're going to have a couple of decisions to make, because you're going to have, as I see it, a few competing goals. One is to get this non-retirement investment account, built up from the $5,000 that's in there. The second is certainly to have the student loans paid off, and the third may be to establish a education fund, because obviously you guys are educated, and that becomes something important to you. What you guys are going to need to figure out, and this is between the two of you, do any of these take precedence over the other? Okay, we're going to go to a quick break, but while we do, think about this. Have you signed up for our free weekly newsletter? It is fantastic. Mark does the greatest job of getting the most important stuff for the whole week, sends it off in a nifty newsletter, and it's free. Just go to JillOnMoney.com and you can sign up for it, and we will be right back.
Follow Jill on Twitter and Instagram for more personal finance content. Just use the handle @JillOnMoney. Now, back to the show.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are delighted that you are tuning in. If you've got a financial question, all you have to do is send an email, askjill@jillonmoney.com. Go check out our podcast. It's a sister broadcast. It's called Jill on Money. Get it? Same name. Anyway, you can get the podcast anywhere you get your podcasts. And if you don't get podcasts, you should. Apple, Stitcher, radio.com, Google Play. Try it out. Jill on Money. Subscribe. You'll see. There's some slightly different stuff on there. Okay? Chris writes, hi, Jill and team. Team would be a team of 2. It's like we're a doubles team, Mark. I have the big serve, and you've got the great net game. Do you like that? I think that that's about right. Okay. Chris says, my wife and I have a question we're grappling with. Maybe you can help. Our first home that we purchased in 2014, we lived in for a few years before converting it to a rental property and then buying a new home. Our accountant has advised us that there are some tax benefits to selling the property this year. Because you lived in the property 2 of the last 5 years, and that means you wouldn't pay the capital gains on the property. That said, our good friend who is a CFP and a CFA. That said, our good friend, a CFP and a CFA that we've solicited advice from, said we should keep it. What are we to do? All right. I'm basically thinking about the decision as this. How much time do I want to dedicate to managing this asset? Cut to the chase, not much. I'm overweight in one asset class, local property, and the tax benefit is the tax benefit from selling compelling. We're 34 and 33. We've got a 9-month-old son. He's very cute. Everything is invested in low-cost index funds with a mix of stock, ETFs, and REITs. We've got about $360,000 in retirement accounts, $230,000 in brokerage, $90,000 in cash for an emergency, $5,000 in a 529. The equity on the rental property is $200,000 to $250,000. Holy smokes! And it cash flows about $500 a month. Accountant says take the tax break, reinvest in something else. CFP says cash is flowing, keep the property. Help. Do you know what I'm going to say to this, Mark? Yeah, this is what I think. I think this is a push, actually. I get both sides of it. I think I'm focusing on your real life issue, which is, as you put it, how much time do I want to dedicate to managing this asset? Not much is your answer. Then I think you found your answer. Because the great part of rental real estate is it cash flows, it's blah, blah, blah. It's fantastic, right? You guys have saved a lot of money. I presume you make a lot of money. Yes, it's cash flowing. Yeah, that's great. But I think actually having a couple $100,000 right now in your little grasp to help boost the amount of money in the 529, to boost your non-retirement savings, to use the tax law, I like this idea. Take the tax break and reinvest. I got to tell you something. I know the CFP, I should probably side with the CFP, but I'm siding with you. I'm siding with you because you are essentially telling us the answer, which is you now have an opportunity to unload something you don't want to manage. So that's what I'm going with. What do you think, Mark? You want to keep that rental property? Yeah. Karina is 30-something, with 30-something female who, with her life partner, just received a family loan to buy a 3-unit residential building. Holy moly! Anyway, a 2.3% loan, plus $50,000 with rent with improvements. We cover the mortgage. How do we best spend the $50,000, which will go fast? We've opened a something with a home improvement store to receive a credit card. Some of our contractors will go down on the price if we offer cash. Do you suggest we use predominantly a credit card that collects rewards or a credit card that offers 5% off? Should we pay contractors by credit card to get the travel rewards? Pay cash. Cash. What do you think, Mark? I'm saying cash. I don't like these credit cards. I think the whole rewards, it's okay, but I'd rather pay cash and know what the number is, and I don't like the idea that you're carrying that load. Be careful. Don't spend that all at once. Okay. Richard, self-employed, and has had difficulty meeting federal student loan obligations, which were for my son several years ago. Original loan was $80,000. Now with interest, $155,000. This guy is 66 years old. Oh, my God. I've recently learned that 15% can or will be deducted from my Social Security for the federal loan. That is true. Is it better to try and negotiate with the federal government regarding this loan or just have the percentage taken out and live with it? The problem is you can't negotiate it. It's a kind of a done deal. My son is in a position to help me pay back this loan since he has recently competed. So, okay, how about this? Have your son pay this loan back And I don't know. I don't think he's going to get. I don't know if I don't get one thing here, and that is that. Let's see. I think this must be. I wonder if this is a parent loan. I think that you I don't know. I'm not sure if you can negotiate this. I mean, I think that your son should pay off the loan and make the payments if he can pay it off. It was for his education. I don't know. This is a terrible situation, Mark. I really don't know what to do about this one. You can try to, I guess you could try to negotiate. I don't think you can negotiate a parent student loan. So I think you're going to take the hit. This is what you're going to do. You'll take the hit on Social Security and let your son make up the difference. How about that? Why don't you do that? I know it's a terrible, terrible choice. I don't like that at all. Oh, gosh. All right. It's Jill on Money. If you have a financial question, ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
If you've missed any part of the show or want to check out a past show, go to jillonmoney.com for more great personal finance content.
You're back. It's Jill on Money, and we are plowing through the emails. So let's get to it. Larry writes that he listens to the show on KOTA Radio, which I just looked up is in Rapid City, South Dakota. How about that? I didn't know that. Thanks for listening. Okay. Larry says, I notice many of your answers are, I need more information. So I'd like to suggest a topic where you can actually inform and educate. Here we go. The knee-jerk reaction of financial planners, commentators, and the government is wait until normal retirement age, or better yet, until age 70. This is almost always the default comment without discussion or discussing options. I'm turning 70 in January with some good fortune, have made it here. But now my health is beginning to fail. Why do I feel happy that I've received 7 years of retirement benefits, having collected at age 62? Many factors do go into this decision. They don't devote proper attention. In fact, I'm amazed that almost without fail, the comment is to wait. Okay, here's what I say. I think that generally speaking, the answer is that if you are healthy and have good history in your family, that waiting can work. However, you'll hear me say this caveat all the time. I cannot guarantee that waiting will work for everyone. It is case dependent. If you have a spouse who's also counting on your Social Security, waiting can be really good in that respect as well. Yes, it is always dependent because obviously you have to live a certain amount of time to make the decision work, right? So to make the decision work of waiting till 70, you have to wait till about 82, 83 years old. If you're not going to make it to 82 or 83, then you would have been better off taking your full retirement age. But if you do make it, then you get that extra money, and that could be good. But it doesn't always work, as you said. Okay, question. I'm 64 years old. I've got $1.2 million in mutual funds. I plan to retire at 66. My Social Security will be $2,700 a month. Do I need the help of a financial advisor to plan for retirement? I don't know. Do you? I don't know the answer to that. What are you going to do? Are you able to manage this yourself? Maybe you don't. Maybe you can use one of these online platforms. Maybe you could just get advice from Vanguard Personal Service Advisor, Schwab Intelligent Portfolio, Wealthfront, Betterment, Facet Wealth. Maybe you could do any of these things. But a lot of this is just based on you. Gloria says, many years ago, my husband and I purchased a $100,000 life insurance policy. I'm 77 years old. My husband died in 1993. I have 6 children. The policy has been self-sustaining until last year when the premium to keep it in force was $1,800. MetLife says the premium will continue to rise each year. My parents lived into their 90s. Should I continue to pay into this policy? I've got 2 pensions and Social Security. Totals about $4,000 a month. I have investments and assets of $1 million plus a $300,000 house. My financial advisor thinks I should continue to pay for the policy. I'm leaning towards letting it lapse. I'm also leaning towards letting it lapse. I don't know why do you need the policy? Is there a cash value in this policy? Maybe just get the money out. I don't think you need it. Well, I mean, I know you don't need it. I don't know why you'd keep it. Frank writes he's going to be 65 in April. Wife is 5 years younger. He claims he's under her health insurance. He's getting mixed advice as to whether or not I'll have to sign up for Medicare before my birthday. I think the answer is you have to sign up for one. Mark, you're going to have to help me with this. You sign up for A but not B, or B but not A. I think you have to sign up for one of them by the time you're 65, even if you're on your partner's plan. You know what? Go to Medicare.com, Medicare.gov, and read through the process. And I'm pretty sure that you're required to do one thing when you turn 65. I can't remember which part it is, though. All right. Scott says, I was stuck in the hospital for a week and listening to your radio show on my tablet. I'm laughing because he's like, I had to be hospitalized to listen to your show. I am 61 years old and use Chase Private Client Group. I want to retire when I'm 65 or 66. My wife is 64. I'm hoping, let's see, she talks about Social Security, no debt. Our total retirement savings, $1.3 million. About $300,000 is post-tax, $1 million, 401ks, Roths, and IRAs. Basic question is, do you believe in a systematic withdrawal system with a balanced portfolio or the 3-bucket system using cash, annuities, and moderate growth for bucket 3? I can supply you with more detailed information when I get home by my laptop. Let me tell you something. I basically believe that this bucket thing is baloney. I think it's a nice way to separate it into your brain, but I don't like the idea of having a fixed rate, a fixed annuity. Rates are pretty low right now. And it sounds to me like when I hear the story you're telling me is that you have plenty of money to fund what you need, right? Because you said that you need about $3,500 to $4,000 a month. Sounds like you're going to probably get there. It's going to be close, but you're not going to get there if you've got a bunch of fees eating into this with annuities. I would get yourself a fiduciary advisor to do a little retirement planning for you, and it sounds like you may want to execute it on your own. That's what I would suggest. All right. You are listening to Jill on Money. If you've got a financial question, ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. We are broadcasting live from the Capital One studios. Capital One, what's in your wallet? Okay, before we finish out the hour, here's a note from Jim who says, I'm 84 and my wife is 79 and we're retired. Our income is $29,500 a month. That sounds good. Maybe a typo, but it could be a year. But I don't know. It's either way, here's the bottom line. We've got no bills other than groceries, fuel, and utilities. Our savings is $275,000. Home is paid for. What should we do? I don't know. I mean, savings is $275,000. I mean, are you asking about an investment? I don't know anything about you. I need more information. I'm sorry. What a pain in the neck I am. Because really, it could be that the best thing for you to do is do nothing. All right? Really. Peter is healthy, 64 years old. He's been unemployed for over a year. He's looking for advice. A 401k with Fidelity has 120 grand in it. Savings are dwindling. A 30-year mortgage of about 100 grand. Let's see. I have no debts. My car's been paid for. My plan is to hold on as best as I can until I hit my full retirement age, 66 years old in 4 months, before pulling the trigger on Social Security. It will be a struggle. Question: would it be better plan to take early retirement in terms of Social Security and supplement it from my 401k and any part-time employment I am able to do, or pull for the 401k for living expenses now and hold off on the Social Security when I reach full retirement? Oh, I think you're better off waiting to get full Social Security benefits. I think. Presuming you're healthy and everything's okay and you've got good family history. I think that is I think it'll be slightly better for you. Getting any sort of part-time job obviously is going to help you out. All right. That's it. That's the whole hour. It's gone by so quickly. Oh, my gosh. All right. If you've got a financial question, send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. Stay tuned. We got a whole nother hour for you. Come on. Just like that. Around the corner. We'll be right back.
It's the weekend, and that can only mean one thing. You're listening to Jill on Money, the show that takes the mystery out of your finances. Here's your host, Jill Schlesinger.
You are back. It's hour number 2 of the program that takes the mystery out of your financial life. I'm Jill Schlesinger. Mark is running the show as always. And we are broadcasting live from the Policy Genius studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. All right, new year, a lot of people trying to figure out how they're going to finagle their careers, how to move forward perhaps. Are you going to zig? Are you going to zag? Are you going to go up? You're going to take a break? You're going to go back to school? What are you going to do? What are you going to do to compete? What are you going to do to enjoy what you do and survive? Well, our guest is going to help out. Neil Irwin is the senior economics correspondent at the New York Times. You might see him in the Upshot column. He's written a book. It's called How to Win in a Winner-Take-All World. And his insights are great. Of course, we'll get to the book, but since I have a senior economics correspondent in my midst, I couldn't help but start the interview with an understanding of how he believes the economy is doing. A little bit of a slowdown from 2018, but 2019, it was a good year. All right, so now we're talking about the economy. So you said we're in a slower growth than last year. We had the tax cuts, mostly corporate tax cuts last year, fueled growth. So describe the economy that most of us wake up and encounter on a day-to-day basis right now.
Look, this is now the longest expansion on record. We've been going 10 straight years with growth, but it's been very slow, kind of uneven growth. And look, the economy's a lot better than it was 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. But it was in really bad shape 5 or 10 years ago. And I think what we now have is a labor market that's really the healthiest it's been in in 20 years, which is really saying something. So if you want a job, there's low unemployment, employers are having trouble finding people, you actually have some leverage for the first time in a long time to ask for higher wages, for a more flexible schedule, for more vacation time, whatever it might be. That's a healthy thing. That's a healthy development. But at the same time, we have this very low inflation, very low long-term interest rates. That kind of makes this economy brittle, and it makes it creates a risk. If something does start to go wrong, the Fed doesn't have much room to cut interest rates. There's not a lot of confidence that if things do take a turn, that it won't kind of spiral out of control.
When you think about the economy and the kinds of businesses that are thriving, we think of so many of these huge names. So, even just going back to the financial crisis, we had like too big to fail, but now they're even bigger. And we think of the domination of some of these tech names. So, the FANGs with maybe a little Microsoft on top. So what are the conditions that led to these mammoth companies dominating?
Yeah, I think this is one of the most important overall trends with the economy over the last 20, 30 years. And I think we're only coming to grips now with all the implications of it. And it's, as you say, it's what economists call superstar companies. It's the rise of these winner-take-all markets where a handful of companies end up dominating major industries. It's true in banking. It's true in retail. It's true in technology. It's true in, smaller hotels. There's all these industries where you can tick off where there's more concentration, and that has big implications. There's a lot of research that tracks that and the relationship between concentration of these industries with slow wage growth over the last 30 years. That seems to be a factor. We see this on the campaign trail as there's discussion about the power of the tech platforms, discussion should antitrust law be more aggressive and stop some of these mergers that resulted in these big companies. And I think it's just a really rich, fertile thing to understand and really forms the backdrop against which we're all trying to live our working lives and have a good, successful career.
Now that brings us into the book. So that's quite a backdrop, right? Because in your book, it's called How to Win in a Winner-Take-All World. So why'd you write this book?
I've spent the last 20 years of my career becoming an economics writer, writing about these things we've just been talking about, these big picture global economic trends, and that's what I do every day. And then at night over the years, I've had countless conversations with friends, sources, colleagues about how we can have a good, successful career in it. What moves to make? When do you change jobs? When do you ask for a raise? When do you try and try something completely new? Over time, what I've realized is what made that set of questions around managing a career very tricky and delicate and hard in this environment. It's the flip side of what I was covering in my day job. They're two sides of the same coin. Shifts in the macroeconomic environment, the way the business environment works, changes in how you can have a successful career are part of the same story. I wanted to connect those two sides and essentially write a guidebook. Okay, this is the economic backdrop we're all living in, and here's how you can make the best of that environment and have a successful, durable career.
I think it's interesting that you are writing from an industry, your own industry specifically, that's undergone these seismic changes, right? And I sort of feel like I'm late to the game, right? I didn't grow up in journalism. I grew up in financial services, also going through seismic changes in many ways. So what is it about the media landscape as you hang out with all of your friends and the Sulzbergers or whoever you hobnob with or whatever? What is it about the experience of being in this thing called media or in the newspaper business, which is shrinking or it's dead or it's all that got you thinking in a way that may have been different before you started researching the book?
Yeah, so 19 years ago, I started my first job. I was a summer intern at the Washington Post on the business desk. And at that time, the Washington Post was this very, very linear place. I was basically one end of an assembly line. I would write a story, feed it into a series of steps where these editors would do it, it would edit it, then it would go to pre-press and go to the printing plants and load it onto trucks and deliver to everybody's doorstep. And the careers people had then were also very linear. People who were ambitious knew exactly how to channel that ambition, what constituted a raise, what constituted progressing. People who weren't as ambitious would sometimes do the same exact job for 20 years. There were people sitting next to me who had been doing pretty much the same thing the same way for decades. And as the news industry has become digitized, has had all these competitive threats, all this upheaval, the way people work at a place like the Washington Post or the New York Times is completely different today. If you go to these organizations, you'll see a bunch of glassy conference rooms. You'll see a team of people with very different technical skills. You'll have traditional writers and editors like myself, but you'll also have graphic artists, user experience specialists, software engineers, product people, business side people figuring out, okay, how are we going to charge for this? The ability to succeed and have a thriving career is kind of up in the air, and it takes a different mindset and a different way of working than 20 years ago when I started. And as I've talked to friends in other industries, it's the same everywhere.
And what is it about that, that Carol Dweck mindset that you're grabbing onto here?
Yeah, look, I think the power of mindset is deep-seated, and I keep going back to the word adaptability. When I look at the people who have really succeeded in this very rapidly changing environment and those who have not, the biggest difference is between those who are able to essentially drive technological change, adapt what they do, how they work as everything else around them changes, and those who have been just too locked into one way of working. And I think when we're growing up, there's a natural instinct. If you're good at something, if you're good at this sport or that activity, you do more of it. It's nice to get positive reinforcement. I think the crucial lesson I learned is becoming the person who can push yourself into areas where you're uncomfortable. It's something that you need to practice and do over and over again. It's not a trait you're either born with or not. It's a skill you can cultivate in yourself, that adaptability.
We'll get back to our interview with Neil Irwin in just a second. If you've got a financial question, you want to know how you can better your life in 2020, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
Do I invest here? Should I put my money there? Jill Schlesinger can help you. Back to Jill on Money.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And if you've got a financial question, we would love to hear from you. Our email address, askjill at jillonmoney.com. I know it's 2020, and that means a lot of people made some financial resolutions. Generally speaking, I must say that it's pretty obvious that everybody just sort of puts this, catch-all financial resolution. Like, I want to be better with money. That's not great. It really has to be a little bit more concrete. But that said, let's just say that you want to get better with your money. Or maybe you want to save more, spend less. Maybe those are your real specifics. The first thing I can really underscore is that unless you understand how money is going in and going out of your household, it is very difficult to do any sort of financial planning. So, again, save more, spend less, pay down debt, lump these all together. This is one category. Basically, this is track your money. And I know it sounds simple, but if you don't get this core concept, you will not be able to make informed decisions about your financial life. If you don't know how much money is available to pay down your outstanding debt. You don't know if you can put a little bit more money into your emergency reserve fund, so you've got that 6 to 12 months. You don't know if you can nudge up your retirement plan contributions. The only way you know that is if you actually understand where your money is going. That's why it's so critical. All right. I just wanted to say that before we get back to our interview with Neil Irwin. And in this segment, we talk about the difference between being a specialist and a generalist and how to win in a winner-take-all world. Where do you come down on the specialist versus the generalist?
So it's funny. I love that this is a trade-off that people act like is one or the other.
Right.
I really don't think that's the way it is. So what I describe in the book is a concept of called glue people, which are people who make a team stick together, work well together. In that environment I'm describing of a bunch of people with a bunch of different skills, are you the person in the room who speaks the language of the people who come from a different background, who makes the product of that group greater than the sum of its parts? If so, you're really valuable in these kinds of organizations. But I'm cautious that it's not just that generalists can be that. It can also be specialists who train themselves in understanding how other parts of the world work. So I have a concept in the book of the Pareto optimal employee, which is somebody who is...
Don't gloss over that. I wanted to spend some time,
we'll spend some time.
So let's go there.
Okay, so there's an old line in journalism that's attributed to A.J. Liebling, who was with The New Yorker, which is, I can write faster than anybody who writes better. I can write better than anybody who writes faster. I look at that as an economics writer, and it seems like A.J. Liebling was describing the idea of optimizing. I think there's an idea of this optimization that comes about when you talk about careers, too. So let's take an organization that needs two types of people. It needs marketing people, and it needs software developers. This is a company that makes software, let's say. You can imagine people who are really good software engineers. And what I'm arguing is they don't need to become marketers, but they need to at least understand what marketing people do and how understanding customer needs fits into creating a good product. Then at the other extreme, you have good marketing people. Even if you're the very best marketing person in the world, in that company, you need to understand the limitations, what the software can do, how to communicate with those software developers to make sure you're communicating what customers demand in an effective way. Then there's people in the middle, and those tend to be managers, maybe a product manager who understands both sides of the aisle and can make that team work together. All of those people are Pareto optimal, meaning they can't be better at one thing without being worse at the other, and all three are really valuable in this modern organization.
So if you aren't that glue person, it doesn't mean you can't have aspects of pulling people together or being a role player on the team. You know, you don't need all superstars. You need some people who just can do some of the tasks that are necessary. But what you're suggesting is that if you have some of these other skills that maybe is not in your lane, then you're going to become more valuable in the end to your employer, right?
Right, and you can do that in different ways in your career. You know, it's volunteering to be on a team or embedding with some different team for 6 months or a year. It's, you know, raising your hand for some project that an executive wants that requires you to work with people from a different part of the building who do something completely different. And I've seen over and over, people who are effective at this are the ones who really have these durable, thriving careers that sustain themselves no matter how the business evolves and no matter how the technology evolves in their particular industry.
I was also thinking about how it can sometimes be hard for people who are later in their careers who wake up one morning and say, the world has changed. Maybe I was sort of ready to adapt 25 years ago, but then I went into survival mode after the financial crisis, whatever, the recession. Now I'm here and I'm 55 years old. I need to work for 10, 15 more years. And I'm scared I don't have those things that Neil's describing. What can that kind of a person do to try to help him or herself?
When you're earlier in life, when you're in college, in your 20s, in your first few jobs, cultivating this adaptability is something that will make you less likely to end up in that spot in 30 years.
Course.
I think practicing change and rolling with change over and over again makes it easier to do when you get to your 40s, 50s, 60s. That said, the person you're describing, look, I acknowledge this is tough. And to be completely blunt, not everybody is able to make this adaptation, especially if they've really gotten settled into one way of working over a 30-year career. But I think it's really the only choice. Unless you happen to be in an industry where you can just kind of hang on for a few more years and then take that pension and get out of town, the only choices are to reinvent yourself as the kind of person who does this. And I've worked with people like this. This is not, I don't want to sound ageist. I've known plenty of people in their 50s and 60s who have been successful at doing this, but they had to have worked through their own kind of process. They were tried to embrace new technologies and trying to become people who were, taking a class in this and working in different ways. It doesn't come naturally to everybody, but you have to try unless you think you can just hang on for a few more years.
As I'm reading the book, I can't help but think about my own weirdo career, which, started on a trading floor, then became, money manager, then moved into media. And I would say that one of the best skills that was forced upon me, I did not want to do it, was learning the sales cycle from beginning to end. And the reason that I think that that's important is that when I came to media as a full-time gig, more than 10 years ago, I did not come in thinking, oh, I'm a talking head and everyone should cater to me. I thought, oh, I've got all these clients. I've got a client who's called network TV. I have a client that's called radio. I have a client that's called interactive. I really thought that everyone around me was a client. And what did I do with a client? I went to a client and said, how can I help you? What can I do to make your life better, easier, more productive? I always feel like sales gets a bad rap in society. But essentially, that's what you're really talking about at the end of the day, which is how can you be of service? How can you make yourself invaluable? How can you be in that glass enclosed conference room and really listen to what is needed and see how you can help solve a problem?
Yeah, I think that's a powerful idea, and I say something more about sales. But in general, like my thesis here is not that there's some trick it's not that there's one weird trick to having a successful career. It's not like you're trying to game the system. What this is about is becoming the kind of person who makes your organization better and makes your products better. And this is a pathway to becoming successful that relies on you being valuable. And look, we all have to do some work to make sure our bosses recognize that we're valuable. Mm-hmm. No question about that. That gets back to the sales dimension. But this is really about producing a situation where you are driving forward positive results for your organization, whether that's a company or a nonprofit, whatever it might be. On sales, look, I have a case study in the book. I went to GE Aviation, where they make jet engines that power jumbo jets, and I was talking to some engineers there who talked about having to be more familiar than in the past with the kind of marketing and sales dimension of what goes on. And so they're not out playing golf with president of Boeing or anything. That's not what engineers do. They're trying to design really good jet engines. But they do have to come up with their ideas of new ways of solving some complex engineering problem and then sell that to a bunch of other engineers. And they have to understand how the sales staff, what they're hearing from airlines and aerospace manufacturers about the tensions in the business and work well with those true salespeople. In that kind of Pareto optimal line I'm describing, that's one of the things I think we all need to be trying to optimize for.
We'll get back to our interview with Neil Irwin in just a second. If you've got those financial resolutions teed up and ready to go, or if you need help, hop onto our website, jillonmoney.com. I've got some tips about how you can better manage your financial resolutions. Got it? Go there, jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back.
.401ks, IRAs, refinancing, she covers it all. Back to Jill on Money with Jill Schlesinger.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are delighted to have with us in the studio Neil Irwin. He is a New York Times columnist, the senior economics correspondent. You might have seen his byline in The Upshot. I love that column. He's written a book called How to Win in a Winner-Take-All World. And what I found interesting about when I was writing a book is that, it's a long process, right? Certainly when I wrote my book, I think that I learned things talking to experts that maybe I didn't know before I started the book. And maybe I had certain ideas that were, I don't know, maybe I took them for granted, or maybe I relied on my old school way of approaching financial matters in a way that might not serve me so well going forward. And I was interested in the idea that Neil Irwin, who has been a journalist for a while and has seen his career go in different directions maybe than he had anticipated, I was interested to finish off this interview with him to find out how he evolved during the process of writing this book. So here's the rest of our interview with Neil Irwin. So you go out, you research this. What is it through this process that changed in your own mindset?
I think I went into this looking for, again, that kind of one weird trick. I thought, for example, if I dig deep enough in the evidence, in the academic research, in the consulting companies' research, there's going to be some magic thing of you need to spend this amount of time at a company and no more. If you've been there X years, you should move on. If you haven't gotten a promotion by Y years, you should move on. That's not really how it works. I think the most compelling lesson I learned is that the way to have a successful career is to make yourself the kind of person who these large, technologically advanced, sophisticated companies that dominate the modern economy be the kind of person who can enable them to make great products.
How do you feel about the generational shift that is less concerned with being a productive, important part of this team, but also wanting to take something out of that and feeling fulfilled in themselves? I'm talking about somewhat of the millennial, this values-driven kind of employee that I wish to be, or that I want to save as much money as I possibly can so I can get out of working in the rat race and doing something fulfilling. How is that shifting the landscape at these big mega corporations?
So I think there's a lot to be said for the idea that, your work, it's not just about the salary and the benefits you receive. It's also about what this does for your own development as a person, both for future steps in your career and for your overall kind of identity and who you are. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I end this book with a kind of essay on the idea that we all have this kind of finite amount of time as waking hours during our prime working years. I ran the math from the time you're 22 to the time you're 65. If you sleep 8 hours a night, you're awake for about 250,000 hours, 250,000 hours.
The clock is ticking.
It's ticking. It's the biggest constraint of them all for most of us. And how you use those hours, I'm not trying to be prescriptive. And if you are the kind of person who wants to be a CEO of a major company or a partner at a law firm, yeah, you're going to be working 80 hours a week. You're not going to see your kids very much. You're going to be putting in a lot of time on the weekends. If you have a different set of priorities, I respect that. And I think getting those trade-offs right is really the key to having a fulfilling life.
I was at a conference and there was a person there who was speaking about time management. And she was really interesting because she talked about all these different surveys that, people feel overworked and overwhelmed. There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
But when you have them keep time diaries over the course of the week, they're not working nearly as much as they think they are. And so what's happening? Like, where is that time going? It's sort of disappearing. It's sort of like mindless spending or mindless eating. It's just that you're spending time. Her point is like, just be more mindful about how you're spending your time. And you might find that you're actually feeling better or make more conscious choices around it.
Yeah, and I think having phones on us all the time with an email popping up every 5 minutes is kind of fuels that. Let me tell you, there's a funny story about this in the book about Microsoft. And there was a unit of Microsoft that had really bad results on its kind of surveys of work-life balance. So the employees in this division, this was the devices unit. They make Xboxes. And a bunch of really valuable engineers, really hard to replace if they were to quit. And the manager's getting nervous because they seem to be unhappy, according to the surveys. And they did some really interesting analytics trying to solve this mystery. They used the metadata of calendar entries and email to figure out what were people doing differently in this unit than other parts of Microsoft that might account for their being unhappy with their work-life balance. And the thing they eventually figured out was fascinating to me. The boss was scheduling too many big meetings. This team, they spent an average of 27 hours a week in these big kind of all-team meetings. And what that meant is people had to squeeze kind of individual work to the evenings and weekends. So those didn't show up on their schedules because you don't usually put it on your schedule if you're going to be doing, working on a project at home. But that's what was kind of making them unhappy with their work-life balance. They shortened those meetings and helped solve the problem. So I think there's, a real sense that, in the same kind of analytical work that Microsoft does, they found that there is kind of a sweet spot for the amount of time people work. And it's not that if you work 70 hours, you're not going to be 30% better than if you work 50 hours. There's diminishing returns to a longer work week. Working, a standard 40 to 50 hour work week actually is pretty good.
And you know what else is good is that giving employees and managing employees building in flexibility in some way, shape, or form. Because I think that if you're looking at how can I better optimize my time, if I feel like I'm always responding to 1,000 different niggling, annoying requests, then it's hard for me to then raise my hand and be like, oh, I want to be on that team or, employee network, blah, 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 blah. You don't want to do that because you feel so, you feel like almost barraged by inquiries. So I think that there has to be also some recognition if you want to be a great employee or you want to be a really smart person, but also that managers have to try to create an environment where those people can rise up.
I even think there's some small things that managers can do to help have that culture. Suppose you as a manager happen to like getting work done on a Sunday afternoon. That's just how you work. You're catching up on emails, little things you had in mind. Maybe you don't hit send on those emails on Sunday afternoon because if you're a worker and you see your email on Sunday night and you have a email from the boss waiting, even if you don't respond to it then, you're stressed out all night thinking about this thing the boss is asking you to do. So why don't you just write those emails, draft them, have them automated to all send at 8 a.m. on Monday. Nothing in the world wrong with that. It's the start of the work week. It sends a signal that, this is for work. This isn't some urgent thing that you have to do on a Sunday. But I think everybody being conscious of that and conscious of those trade-offs and balances is just super important.
Thanks so much to Neil Irwin. The book is called How to Win in a Winner-Take-All World. We will have a link to it so you can buy it on our website, JillOnMoney.com. Just click on the listen button. You can read more about Neil. And if you've got a financial question, this is the place for you. Send us an email. Ask Jill at JillOnMoney.com. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to Jill on Money, where Jill Schlesinger takes the mystery out of your finances.
You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are delighted that you're joining us for the first show of the brandy new year. It's exciting. How about that market performance in 2019? Don't count on it. It just shows you. 2018, everyone thought the market was going to soar because of the tax cut for corporations. Markets went down. Stocks did. 2019, growth slows down. And guess what? Markets went up. Mark, what's the lesson of that? It is, I believe, do not fight the Fed. Fed cut rates 3 different times. But I would also say that the real lesson is stick to your game plan. Don't try to time the market. Very few people predicted what happened over the last couple of years, not to mention the decade. But be that as it may, you've got real financial issues. If you'd like to ask us a question, just send an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. This is a note from Frank, who lives in Connecticut. And here's the story. I have a daughter going to school in North Carolina. I also have a son who plans to move to North Carolina next year after he graduates. I'm considering purchasing a condo in North Carolina for my son to live in and daughter to use when not in school. She stays down there most of the time already, and I would hope that she can establish residency with that condo. In-state tuition would save about $30,000, which I would use for the down payment. My question, would it be best to purchase in my name or in one or both of their names? Would I expose myself to North Carolina state income taxes if it's in my name? Not even sure who to consult with. Yeah, well, okay. First of all, if you think that this is really about your daughter and your son, right, then I think that having your name on that condo, the problem is if it's not on the condo, are they going to qualify for a mortgage on their own? They may not. So maybe what you end up doing is they can buy it, but you have to somehow be part of the mortgage, which is not my favorite way to own property. Maybe you could do it as maybe the three of you would buy it, and you can gift them the money for a down payment. But I think that if your name is on that property, you are actually going to be subject to taxes. Now, that said, I don't know what the tax situation in North Carolina is, but what I would think is worth considering is just talk to an accountant or a tax preparer and find out how your situation would be impacted. And, ownership in your name probably makes more sense. Again, because I'm not sure that they're going to be able to qualify for a mortgage. But I think in the biggest picture, beyond your question, should you really be doing this? I get it that you're going to save money, but are you going to tie up money that you don't need to tie up? Who's going to pay for it? Has the cash flow? Lots of other big questions. So I need a little more information, but for your specific question, it's an accounting issue. Okay? Okay, here's a note from Michael. He and his wife each have a variable universal life insurance policy, a VUL, issued by Minnesota Life. I'm wondering, do I need this policy? Here's the situation. The policy value for Michael's insurance policy is $250,000 plus an accumulation value of $12,000. So meaning that I think he means the death benefit. The wife's is $330,000 with $15,000 of accumulation. We also have a 30-year term policy from Transamerica. My wife owns her own business. She got a 20-year policy. I feel the money we invested in the VUL can be better used to help increase our annual IRA contributions and pay down debt. Oh, yeah, baby. Michael, you got it. Absolutely. So 2 things you have to do before you just get that money out. Speak to the folks at Minnesota Life. Find out what the tax liability would be if you surrendered the policy. Just gave it up. There probably isn't a huge tax liability, but just in case you'd like to know that. And then when you have that information, make sure you follow up with us because we want to know the answer to that. The second thing is if there is some sort of tax liability, you may be able to borrow the money out of the policy, use the loan to pay down debt, and then also be not contribute any more money. But we need a real analysis of what's in that policy, the tax liability, and what would happen if you were to surrender it. When you get that information, you let us know. I am very interested in the answer. And maybe you actually don't have to do much more than just blow it out, okay? Meg is writing, and she says her daughter graduated college back last May. Due to their family financial situation, she had to borrow a lot of money. So now Meg's daughter has federal and private loans that she needs to repay. We think she should refinance her private loan. She's worried she won't be able to make the payments. Who do we turn to help us figure out the best options and to get her payments down low enough so she can pay them? Do I send her to a credit counselor? Do we go to a bank? It's so overwhelming. Any advice would be appreciated. So here's 2 things to think about. You might want to check out Common Bond. They were the guy who is the CEO was a guest on our program. And we also had somebody on with him, money-mentor.com. And this was those are sort of the financial aid people. But I think that you might want to check out Common Bond or SoFi or some of these other organizations and shop around a little bit. If you get some, sort of run into a roadblock, we'd be happy to help you out. But I like the idea of trying to figure out a better way for her to manage it, but I don't want her to set herself up for failure. So that's really important. Okay, it's Jill on Money. When we return, we'll finish out the show. A couple more questions here. If you have a financial question that's popping up in your brain, just send us an email. Ask Jill at jillonmoney.com. We'll be right back. You're back. It's Jill on Money. And we are broadcasting live from the Policy Genius studios. Policy Genius is the easy way to compare and buy insurance. Just go to policygenius.com. So easy to do. Sometimes I say stuff, I should really be a little bit more explicit. This is from Pedro, who listens to the show religiously and enjoys it. And he says, that I recently mentioned I had a problem with Merrill Lynch. Okay, so I don't really have a specific problem with Merrill Lynch. So Bank of America, which now owns Merrill Lynch, what is the issue that I often raise, whether it's Merrill Lynch or Morgan Stanley or Wells Fargo, any of these big institutions? My problem with them is usually that they tend to be expensive. And often the people who work there who are really, by and large, usually they're good people, but they often are serving many masters. They're serving you, the client. They're serving their bosses. They're trying to satisfy certain obligations that they have. So let me tell you what Pedro writes. He's 64 years old. He said he was previously managing all of his investments through TD Ameritrade. Since I'm within 5 years of retirement, I needed financial advice. Based on recommendations from my accountant, I chose a wealth advisor from Merrill Lynch. All my accounts have been transferred there, taxable and retirement accounts. Then while listening to you, and it seemed he's had issues with Merrill Lynch, I think maybe his little antennae went up. So Pedro writes, my advisor says that he has a fiduciary responsibility. But he recently contacted me to recommend the Partners Group Private Equity Master Fund and a Blackstone Real Estate Income Trust. While reviewing the information that he sent me, I was concerned with the annual expenses and that Merrill Lynch gets a selling commission. Sounds a little slimy and not exactly fiduciary. Your thoughts? I have the same thoughts. Here's what I'd like to know. I would like you to ask this Merrill Lynch wealth manager, do you owe me a fiduciary responsibility at all times? And I want to see that in writing. And then what I'd like to know is, Pedro, when you follow up with him, I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what else is in the portfolio, how much he's charging you, and what you understand the relationship will be going forward. You might have some better opportunities. All right? Hey, thanks so much for writing, and thank you for listening. If you've got a question throughout the week, all you have to do, go onto the website, jillonmoney.com. And don't forget, you can subscribe to our sister broadcast. It's called the Jill on Money Podcast. You can get it on Apple, Stitcher, radio.com, Google Play, anywhere you find your favorite podcasts. All right, that's it. That's the show. Happy New Year. We'll talk to you next week.